so that we can record this webinar. And you will receive that in an email probably next week. So if you want to go back and view it again, that will be an option as well. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Tara and let her jump in and get started.
Thank you so much. Does my audio sound good? Sound okay?
Yep.
Yep, good deal. Great. Well, thanks for coming, everybody. It's really exciting to have everybody here. I'm honored to be a presenter in this series. We've had a similar webinar series in Montana, and it's gone really well. So I'm excited to share. Okay, so does that look okay as well? So it looks good. Great. Thank you. Wonderful. Okay, well, my name is Tara Mastel, and I work for Montana State University Extension, and I am an associate specialist, and I work in the area of community development. I'm also the program leader for Montana for community development. And I've had a great response to this presentation. We did this study in 2021. We hope to do it every 5 years. And I presented it all across the state to different groups. And it's been a really engaging, it's been a great topic for engagement. So we've had, it's been really fun to do. So this is the presentation that I share with community leaders across our state. So I will just letting you know that as that's kind of the audience, not necessarily for an academic audience, but more for community-based leaders. So I will just get started, and I am going to pause after kind of some of the major sections of this study and of this presentation, and I would hope that you might have questions or comments, and happy to answer them at that time, so it can be kind of engaged, hopefully a little bit more interactive. Okay. So I'm going to just get started. So this research study that we did really came out of our Reimagining Rural program. Reimagining Rural is a program that we have in Montana, and it's a virtual program that we designed to be virtual before the pandemic. It is a 3-night program for rural, kind of remote rural communities to come together. They're in person in small groups across the state, and they're broadcast a Zoom presentation with speakers talking about data and success stories in rural. And so they hear this presentation, they talk about it amongst themselves, and they kind of decide what works for them, what do they like, what might be inspiring to them. So this research study came out of this because our main speaker was Benjamin Winchester. He is from the University of Minnesota Extension, and he shared his data with us, and from there we replicated the study that he did, and so that's where the study came from. So it would not have happened without funding from the Montana Community Foundation and the Montana Farm Bureau Foundation. That was who funded the study for us. So I have to give credit to them, and we're really excited to have this baseline for our state. And throughout, I share data from Minnesota as well. The original study was done by Cheryl Burkhart-Kreisel and some of her colleagues in Nebraska. And then Ben Winchester replicated that in Minnesota, and then we replicated it here in Montana. And the data is actually quite similar throughout. So I am talking about Montana data. I share Minnesota data throughout, so you can kind of see how that works for your community. So before I get into the actual data of our study, I'm going to share a few concepts that were really fundamental to us and why we wanted to do this study in Montana, and also fundamental to kind of helping our point of rewriting the rural narrative and kind of reframing how we think about rural communities and rural, what's possible in rural. And a lot of this came from Ben Winchester's work, so I will credit that as we go. So the first kind of main concept behind this whole idea is that people move pretty frequently. When we're talking to rural audiences, a lot of times they don't think about this, especially in Montana. We think, well, we're pretty our communities stay the same, but actually that's not really true. This is census data. In Montana, we have 49% of our households move every 5 years, which is similar to the state as a whole. And this is census data compiled by Ben Winchester. And this is very surprising to our Montana families that see this. The second kind of main point that I want to share before we get into the data is, this is kind of a big deal, is that people have been moving to rural for decades. Again, in Montana, rural communities, we think, well, all that's happening is people are leaving. Our population is declining. Our young people leave, and we want to try to keep them here. But this is data, again, census data. So this is compiled and analyzed by Ben Winchester again, but I'm going to share this here so you can kind of see that this is percent change within one county between 2000 and 2010. So here we see the brain drain, which is what's so alarming, is that the young people are leaving. And yes, that is absolutely true. And so you can see this is like ages 10 to 14, ages 15 to 19, 20 to 24, 20 to 25, and so on. But here we have the brain gain. This is people in their 30s and 40s moving into rural counties. And you can see this is Phillips County, which is in north central Montana. It's a very remote, sparsely populated county in the prairie, far from any mountains. This is definitely the high plains of Montana. Here's the population by decade over time, and you can see that the population is declining. But I hope you can see that this cohort change shows that it's not declining uniformly across the age groups. So this population change is very, this pattern is similar across all counties across the country that are, this is all rural counties that are designated rural. This is what it looks like. So just for example, here is Richland County. So this is similarly located. This happens to be an oil-rich county, but you can see the similar pattern. So we have the kids coming in 10 to 14, and that's likely they're coming from their parents are moving in, but we see the people in their 20s leaving. They're going to school or work or who knows what they're doing, but they're leaving. And then we have people in their 30s and 40s moving in. These are the folks that have jobs. They're coming in with maybe a remote job. They're coming in with a business. They're bringing their education, their skills, their wealth that they've accumulated so far. Here's another rural county, and you can see the same pattern. Population is declining, or slightly over time, but the same population pattern. So here's the converse. This is Missoula County in the western part of the state, and it is definitely for Montana standards an urban county. And you can see here, this is where folks are going. At least not everybody, but you can see that this is definitely a change. So you see the increase in young people, and then a decrease in people in their 30s. So that's the concept of, people have been moving to rural for decades. They're not just all leaving. One more idea that I want to share with you is that changes that are happening across certainly the United States and globalization are more evident in smaller towns. One example is our trend towards smaller families. So in 1940s, we had the average household size was 3.6. Fast forward to 2021, the average household size has decreased by 31%. So what does this mean? This means that the impact of this global trend really is more out. You can see it in our smaller communities, because you have fewer kids in the school. You have maybe the same or similar number of households, but there's fewer people in those households. So fewer members of the workforce, especially you see it in our schools. But people hear the population is declining. It may be simply because the average household size is declining. It may not be because, it could be, but it's not necessarily because our small towns are not desirable. the last point that I want to share with you is that Montana has the second highest leadership demand in the country. And what we mean by that is, so here's, this is a calculation that Ben Winchester has done, looking at the population per organizational role. So he has calculated that, looking at taking the total number of organizations that need leaders, so nonprofit organizations and government organizations, so like for government, school boards, for example, planning boards, town councils, county commissions, that sort of thing, and also looking at nonprofit organizations. So for every nonprofit, you need to have a minimum number of board members. So taking the total number of organizations, multiplying that by the number of leaders needed minimum by law, and then dividing that by the total population. So you can see that in Montana, we need 13 people. We need a minimum of 1 in every 13 people to hold some kind of a leadership position. So this does not include those people that are just volunteering, like, running the parade or flipping burgers at the fundraiser, that sort of thing. This is a very conservative estimate. And then you can see that Montana ranks second behind North Dakota. And it's definitely, this phenomenon is due to the relatively low population and the relatively high number of organizations that need leaders. Okay, so I'm going to pause here and see if what you all think. Oh gosh, I haven't been monitoring the questions here. So we've got a number of questions. Oh, maybe not. People are introducing themselves. Okay, so Michael Darty is asking, are the data adjusted for people getting older? You know what? I don't know that I can answer that.
Yeah, it's like the 20 to 24 in 2000 is the 30 to 34 in 2010. So literally a demographic, shift could it may not be capturing what, if it's not adjusted, it may not be necessarily capturing what we're hoping it captures, because it's just, and changes in, a population change, or, a bubble, a high birth rate in one half decade may work its way through the table and give you gains and losses over time if you're not comparing the same cohort to the same cohort. Since it's the term cohort is used, I'm hoping it is, but I just wanted that's just something that occurred to me looking at that data. I also know that what may, if it's not the last one, the urban Missoula, that may really be a difference, because if I'm right, isn't that where University of Montana is located?
Yep. Yeah,
so you would see a big jump in.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then again, that may also tell me the cohort, because you have a whole bunch of young people coming in, so you get this big jump because all the young people are coming there. So you got a lot more young people in that 18 group than you would have had 8 years old 10 years before.
Yeah. So it is census data, so it's looking at the age groups for each census survey. So I guess I'm not sure if I'm answering, but maybe we should talk about this after the thing. So I'm happy to talk with you more about this later. Any other comments on this whole idea of the kind of key concepts that I just shared with you? Any other thoughts? Anything surprising? Not seeing anything, so I'm going to move forward. Okay, so now let's get into the data that we found in the study that we did. So here's our research team. We had Saber Moore, who was seeking her PhD. She just graduated with her PhD. And then Sarah Schmidt-Wilson, she's in the Department of Education, and she does a fair amount of research in rural communities. And then Dr. Eric Austin, who does a lot of consulting and facilitating in groups in rural communities. So we all had an interest in rural communities. What we were trying to find out is who is moving into Montana communities, and why are they choosing these places? Because if they're moving, presumably they could go anywhere, and what they think once they get there. So what are they doing once they get into these communities? And like I said, this was originally done in Nebraska, replicated in Minnesota, and then we replicated what they did in Minnesota. it was a paper pencil study. We sent out 9,000 surveys all across the state of Montana. We sent them out in April and May of 2021. The list that we used was a pretty solid list in that it was from the Montana Department of Revenue. So they took, because we have a centralized tax system in Montana, so we took parcels of land that had a home that had changed hands in the previous 5 years. So that's what we called newcomers. And those were the folks that were able to get the study. It's great in that it was a pretty reliable list. We knew the homeowner or the property owner. We knew all the how to get a hold of them, that sort of thing. Oh, we took out second homeowners and anything that looked like a rental property, we took that out because that would not be like, it would be addressed to the owner, not the renter. So you can kind of get at this. It's a great list in that it's pretty reliable. However, it does exclude some key people. It excludes renters, and it does also exclude people that live in our Native American reservations. We have 7 reservations in Montana, and those folks are not subject to this Department of Revenue list. So it's not perfect, but in Minnesota, they used a list that they purchased from a mail list company. You can see our data is actually quite similar. I'm excited to say that the Montana Community Foundation, who funded this, has also has seen that we need to do better with a survey including people, our largest minority group, which is Native American people. So we're working on developing a complementary study to this to understand what's going on with movers in on our reservation communities. So we had, we sent out 9,000, we got 1,204 responses. And today I'm going to talk about the 811 that are in the workforce, ages 18 to 64, because that's most similar to what they did in Minnesota. So we sent we really wanted to, my work is really focused on rural community vitality. And so we wanted to have a sense of what's happening in rural communities. So we oversampled in rural. So this is a map of where we sent survey. We sent them everywhere. We sent them to every county. Half of them went to the counties in blue, which is our urban in Montana, and we chose those by the U.S. Census metropolitan and micropolitan counties. So those are the counties that were included there. And so how we defined rural is everything that's not metro and micro. So we sent half to the blue counties and half to the yellow. We didn't get responses from Petroleum County and Powder River County. That's why those are white. They are our 2 most low population counties, so it kind of makes sense that we didn't get any from there. Our oversampling worked, which was pretty great. We got half from the metro micro, the blue, and we got half from the half of our returns came from the rural. So people ask a lot of times, is this a pandemic story? And I do think that there's some impact from the pandemic in that we got a pretty high response rate, but looking at it, it's not really a pandemic story. So I'll start with the bottom point here. One of the questions in our study was your move motivated by the pandemic? 4% said yes, only 4%. Sorry, I'm getting out of the way here. So only 4% said their move was motivated by the pandemic, but let's look a little bit closer. Our sample did include people that moved between December 2016 and January 2021. So that 5-year period. 28% of the respondents that we got moved during 2020 and 2021. So about only a quarter of our respondents even could have moved during the pandemic because the pandemic wasn't happening before that. So you can see that there's probably some impact, but it's not a pandemic story 100%. Also, when I share the data, I also include Minnesota data, and the Minnesota study was done in 2019 prior to the pandemic. So you can see that there. So let's get into what we learned. First of all, any questions on any of that methodology or anything there?
I have a question.
Yeah, great.
Back to the the question about motivations,
Yeah.
was there, would people be counted if they said there was any influence of the pandemic, or you know, like a lot of the census data asked, was this the main reason you moved or something like that? So what does this include?
The question was, it was an independent question from the others, and the question was, I don't have the exact wording, but the question was your move motivated by the pandemic? And it was,
so it could be,
sure it was a yes
you
or
could
no.
interpret it either way then,
Yes.
but it would certainly include some people that said that it wasn't the only reason that motivated them, but it influenced us.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, so I'm going to quiz you first. So get ready to. This is how I do this in communities when I share this, and it's always super fun to do. So I ask people, what's your guess on what % of movers were returning to a place they had lived before? Because there's a lot of times there's a like, especially in rural places, there's a notion that people are just returning. That's who moves in, is people that, you know, are coming home or moving back or whatever. You hear that a lot with talking about rural. But what do you guess? What % of movers do you think are returning to a place they lived before? Or what % are moving there that have never lived there before? So what's your guess on percentage that have lived there before, returning to a place they lived before? Anybody have a guess? You can put it in the chat or just unmute. 5%, 20%, 50, 20, 40%. Okay. All right. Okay, I'm going to reveal here. So what we found was 34% have lived there before. So 25% in Minnesota. So, and actually this was lower in rural places. It was higher in the metro, but this is an average of overall. 34% had lived there before. So what I say, so when I present this, I'm talking to community-based leaders, and what I say is, and mostly rural. So what I say is, okay, so a third of people have lived there before. 2/3 have never lived there before. So when they're new people coming into your community, they don't have a name that's recognizable. They don't know when the county fair is. They don't know when the dump hours are. They need some kind of help, connection to get connected in. So here's an opportunity for you if you want to welcome people in, if you want to help them get acclimated. If you find a newcomer, chances are they're not from there. Here's another one. I think I have 3 questions total. What % do you think move for a job? What % of people move for a job? 85%. It's the first guess. 75, 68, 75, 50. So pretty high. Thank you. 75%. Okay, I'm going to reveal here. Actual number is 35% move for a job. It's a little bit lower in Minnesota. 31% in Minnesota. So 35. So again, 2/3 of people are not moving for a job. They're moving for some other reason. And we asked that specific question. So again, so if you're not moving for a job, you're maybe not connected into the community. If you're moving for a job, you have coworkers that are going to help you figure out all those kind of key questions. I suppose if you're moving not for a job, then you're finding a job shortly after. But we'll get into that. Okay, last question that I'm going to quiz you on. What % of movers in our study had children? What's your guess on how many had kids? Kids living in the household. 30%, 43, 35, 85%, 30. Okay, kind of all over the board. I love it. So what we found was 39%, a little bit lower than in Minnesota. In Minnesota, they found 47%. So again, why is this important? So if you're moving with kids, you have an easy connection into the community. You're going to send them to public school or some kind of school, or maybe even a homeschool group. So you're going to have some kind of connection. So, but 60%, at least in Montana, a little more than half don't have kids in Minnesota. So they're gonna not have a connection. So if you want to welcome newcomers in, if you want to get them connected, if you want to add them to your community, reach out and find connections for them. Okay. Let's move on to the first question that we asked was when you and this is how it was worded on the study, when you chose to move to this community, how important were each of the following factors for your household? So that was the question as it was asked. We had 22 factors, and each factor was, people could rate each factor independently on a scale, 1 to 5, important to not important. So here's the top 5 reasons. Boy, I am just in the way here. Top 5 reasons why people moved. The number 1 was to find a desirable natural environment, better access to the outdoors. You can see here, this is our ranking for Montana, our percentages, and this is what the percentages were for Minnesota. So number 1, to find a desirable natural environment, to find a less congested place to live, to take advantage of a slower pace of life, to live in a smaller community, to find a safer place to live. So what's missing from this? What's not here? Definitely what we always hear is a job or housing or something like that. These are the top reasons for people moving that they rated important or very important. Is their non-financial reasons. They are quality of life reasons. So here's all 22 of the factors or the reasons for moving. People rank them independently, and these are ranked from top to bottom. It's a lot of data. And my point here is that the reasons related to quality of life, I've highlighted them in yellow here. You can see they're ranked at the top. They're clustered at the top. So the top 5 we already talked about. Number 6 was to find a good environment for raising kids, to live among people with similar values. And that is defined, each person defines that differently. To live closer to relatives, to find a job that allowed for better work-life balance. So the reasons related to quality of life definitely clustered at the top. Financial reasons, and certainly there's fewer of them that we included, but those are at the middle and at the bottom. Higher costs or lower cost of living, a job that matches my skills. So definitely people are moving for non-financial reasons. I'm going to pause here and ask if anybody has any thoughts or comments on this kind of reasons for moving. Any thoughts on that? All right. Did you have any open-ended options? Yes, we did. Very few. And I have some open-ended comments that I'm sharing with you in a little bit here. Most of it was not because of that. We needed to keep the cost down, and yes, that's kind of, I guess, the main reason. Okay, rating of the new community. So this was the next question that we asked. For each of the following statements, please indicate your level of agreement or disagreement. So this was overall, I mean, the takeaway from this is like, these numbers are super high. People are pretty happy with their move. This region offers many natural amenities and recreational opportunities for residents. I'm satisfied with living in this community. I feel safe. I can find activities that are interesting. I trust the people living. So even a little bit higher than Minnesota. As you can see, sorry, I'm in the way. So overall, people are quite happy with their move. We asked if the community is welcoming. In Montana, 74% said it was. Minnesota, 77% said it was. Here's some comments, more on the positive end of things. I never thought I could love a place so much. Home is where Montana is. We love everything about living in Montana. One of the best things I ever did. Let's keep Montana great. Montana's a beautiful state, but really cold. Yes, it is. People in Montana talk a lot about, well, people move from somewhere warm and they say, well, do they stay? Are they going to stick around after the last winter? So here's some negative comments. And we definitely have a thing happening in Montana right now where we have had a very high number of people moving to Montana, and it's wearing on some. And that showed up definitely in our comments. I have been disappointed by the lack of welcomeness in our new community. So many moving in from out of state has changed the community for the worse. Traffic lines, unfriendly people. I'm a Montana native, send all these people back to where they came from, go home. So I always tell this story. We did a focus group where we had people, it was a Zoom focus group, but we had people from all across the state who had moved into Montana from out of state. And we were asking them questions about another project that we're doing, but it was very alarming that every single one of those people in that group had been insulted or yelled at or told to go home one way or another, shown that they were not welcome because they came from out of state. So when I share this presentation, I always tell that story. And I mean, we have bumper stickers that say Montana's full, go home. We have hats. I mean, it's there. I wouldn't say it's pervasive, but it is there. And so I just tell people that, like, let's be aware of this. And you're the leaders in your community. When you see this conversation happening, you can be the one that points out the positive things that newcomers bring, that we're essentially all newcomers except for the Native American community that has always been here. So I point this out especially because later on in this presentation, I show the value that the newcomers bring, and we talk about the shortage of volunteers that we have. Yeah, so there's a question about the political leaning that might have influenced the choices. Absolutely. We think that it's definitely shows up when I'm going to just back up just because it's a really interesting point of view. Like to find a safer place to live. So this was 1 year after the George Floyd situation that we had, and all the unrest that has been happening in the U.S. To live among people with similar values. So that is definitely, we think, related to political leaning, but that's defined. It depends. Like, we have some communities that are in Montana that are quite liberal, and a lot of communities that are quite conservative. So it depends on where you're going. Any other comments before we move on to the next section? Any racial or ethnic data part of the study? Yes, I don't have that in this presentation. I do have it we have a almost 70-page white paper on this. Are shocking to me and to others, and that we had actually more racial and ethnic diversity in our study than in Minnesota, but we're still less than 10% of any kind of racial or ethnic diversity in Montana. Okay, so the next part of the study was use of local amenities. How often do you attend or visit each of the following in a more typical year? So again, really high numbers. So this is the ranking. Here's the percentages, and here's for Minnesota. So overall, the takeaway is, yes, people they're happy with the amenities that we have here in Montana. This is the part that is very interesting, again, because as I said, I present this a lot of times to community leaders, whether it's government or nonprofit or just community volunteers. And this is where the value really comes out to me for our newcomers. How often do you engage in each of the following activities in your community in a more typical year? So a lot of stuff. On the left, all the different kinds of activities, and on the right, it's never, rarely, sometimes, often, going left to right. And I'm just gonna point out, so worked on a community or regional project, 29% said sometimes, 16% of our respondents said often. Attended a public meeting to discuss town or school affairs, 25% said sometimes, 16 or 12% said often. A lot of government officials just really are dying to have people come to their meetings. Attended a club or organizational meeting. That's just about half. This one is also quite interesting. Volunteered. 32% said sometimes, 23% said often. Huge number. So if you're looking for volunteers, Don't look at the same 10 people. Look beyond that. Find newcomers. Oops, I want to point something out here. So if you look at this attended religious services, kind of interesting. 40% said never, and about 40% said sometimes or often. So, somebody pointed out, in the past, people might have moved to a new town and gone to church and found connections at church, but if about half are not doing that anymore, maybe again, it's another opportunity. So who are these folks? So they're given the group of folks that we surveyed, homeowners. We have, they have, I'm just looking at the housing here, 97% own their home. That's quite a bit higher than the average rate in Montana, which is 68% of homeownership. They have higher incomes. In Montana, our median household income is $56,000. So they definitely have higher incomes, which you would expect because they are homeowners. They have higher degrees of education. Our survey had a 61% with a bachelor's degree or higher. In Montana, we have about half that is the average. And 78% were employed. So yeah, these folks, they do have higher incomes. And this makes sense because we didn't survey renters. We did not include people on our reservations, which tend to be our lowest income folks. But I will say these people are newcomers overall are really hard to find, and surveying and finding information about renters or lower income people also is really hard to find as I try to get into surveying folks on our reservation. So it's not perfect, but it does give us an indication. So people always ask, well, where did folks come from? 48% moved from within the state. 49% moved from outside of the state into Montana. This is a number of people that moved, not percentages. So 57 probably households moved from California, 57 from Washington. You can kind of see that there. If you looked at the out-of-state people that are going to school at our universities in Montana, this is the same. These are the states that want to come to Montana, that are typically coming. These are the places that like Montana. It's very, very common list. A little bit more economic data about the movers. So 9% said they work remotely for someone else. 6% said their spouse or partner does. So it's actually right spot on with, I'm just writing an article on this right now. In Montana as a whole, 14%, the census says 14% of Montanans are remote workers. So I think it's 18% for the country overall. That's from the census. Certainly other sources have it higher. 23% of these folks own businesses. 34% created it. So this also might contribute to the higher incomes because business owners typically have higher incomes. 6% owned a farm, 36% created the farm. We don't know what that means. As far how do they define farm? Because that's can be pretty broad. But these folks, they're moving in, they want to get involved, they have resources, so they're pretty valuable. And they love the same things about the state that the people that are already here love. Here's a little bit more data on, this is a kind of a rough map that shows, the blue is people working in person. So it shows where they're moving from and where they're moving to in the state. And the red is remote. So you can see that overall, most people are working in person. And they're coming from all over the country, all over the place. Here's a zoom in on the West Coast. I do get the question, especially when I'm in rural communities doing this. Well, are they coming from, like Eastern Washington, like the more rural parts of some of these states? And it definitely, you can see the higher number. So here's Denver. This is probably Phoenix, probably LA, the Bay Area, Seattle. And definitely they're moving to our more populated areas in Montana, but there are some in the more sparsely populated prairie and rural counties. Any comments, any thoughts? I have the last part I have is kind of my takeaway, my summary of what I think this means, but I'm curious if anybody has any comments or thoughts before we get into that. Okay, I will get into kind of the wrap up. So what does this mean? Definitely means that all parts of our state are desirable, and we have these kind of very highly promoted communities in Montana: Bozeman, Missoula, Billings. A lot of people are moving there. They get press across the country about how great it is to live there. So some of our more sparsely populated, rural, remote towns think, oh, nobody wants to live here, but that's not true. This shows us that all parts of our state are desirable, no matter what. We all love the same things about our town. So the people that have been here for a long time, we love the same things about the people that are moving in. Some newcomers want to get involved, and there's definitely an opportunity there for some of our community-based organizations that are looking for volunteers. We're mostly welcoming. I think we can do more on that, at least in Montana. I think overall it tells us that rural is changing, rural is not dying. So what can we do? I think the number one is like we have to recognize that our communities are changing. Almost every community in Montana is really changing right now. This is my hometown where I grew up in Northeast Montana, very sparsely populated, rural, remote community. I have Native American ancestors that any development of this sort is a change. The far left corner is when my great-grandma rolled in on her covered wagon with her mom and dad and her sisters and brothers. Dirt roads, no bricks, no cars. The middle is when my mom grew up in this town, my mom and dad, and every lot is full, lots of cars, brick buildings, very well developed. The far right is how it looks now. So I live my hometown is on a reservation, and it's been decimated by the meth epidemic. I mean, it's really, when I grew up, it was Mayberry. Now it's really changed. And so, and like community, so this is one example of my hometown. It's really changed, but I love it still. And even like Bozeman has changed so much. It was a cow town when my parents went to college there. Now is like it's like part of Silicon Valley. It's very, very different. So we just have to recognize that, of course, our communities have changed. We have to take a moment and grieve and mourn, because the thing that we loved is different. But if we're going to be successful and move on, we have to kind of take what we loved about it and remember that and cherish it, and then move forward and look at the opportunities. What does this change bring? What can we do with it? What can we make better from it? We need to look at our town through a newcomer's eyes. Some of these very rural, remote towns, we only can see what we've lost. We don't have a grocery store anymore. We lost our hardware store. We don't have Little League. Our pool is closed. But you know what? The people are moving to every town in Montana. Every town in the country, and they're moving there for what it is right now. They're not moving because they pity you, because they see your schools declining in population. They're going to put their kids in there to help you out. No, they're not. They're moving for what it is right now because they love it. I always tell this story about one of my colleagues. She moved, her admin assistant moved to this pretty remote rural town in eastern Montana, and she moved there from Texas. And one day she was in the office and she just stopped everything and just said, "Oh my gosh, look at those kids outside. Those kids are riding their bikes just all by themselves, just right down the street. No adults around." She's like, "I can't believe that. I love this town so much." And my extension colleague, she couldn't believe it because she grew up there. And she's like, "Of course, yeah, that's great. I mean, our town is really great." So see your town through a newcomer's eyes, because they're moving for what it is right now, not out of pity. They love it. I really encourage us to practice our best hospitality, because as I said, sometimes, especially if you're in a small town and you're you're at the gas station and you see that person down the pumps and you're like, oh, I think they bought the Smith place. How could they afford that? They must be one of those remote workers. I bet they're making $100,000, whatever it is, but I encourage you to just get out of your head and extend your hand and practice your best hospitality. I used to have this be welcoming, but it's more than that. It's getting out of your comfort zone and really trying to welcome those folks, because they're choosing your community for what it is right now. They love the same things that you love about it, and they are bringing a lot of assets, and maybe they just haven't been welcomed in. They might not know how to get engaged, and you might be the bridge that helps them do that. I'll leave you with this quote from some of our favorite folks, Becky McCrae and Deb Brown of Save Your Town. Small towns that are open to new ideas will be the best position to thrive no matter what change comes their way. And certainly in Montana, we have so much change in every town. And so I would just think this is a great reminder to be open to new ideas and think what we can do with the change that's coming. I just have to say thanks again to the Montana Community Foundation and the Montana Farm Bureau Foundation for making this all possible. We have this baseline data now, and we hope to replicate this every 5 years. And here is my contact information. I'll put that in the chat as well. And that's what I have for you. Thank you so much. Here's my contact information. And I have I can put a link to the study as a whole if you want to, if you're having trouble sleeping one night, you can read our white paper. It breaks out all the various aspects of this, rural, urban, that sort of thing. So there's the link to the study. Oh, is there a fact sheet? I will share that with Travis. We do have a fact sheet. I can't find it. It'll take me a minute to find it, and we're printing it, and I am going to start handing that out when I present this, but I don't have it at the ready right now. But I do have it. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, we can definitely attach that to the email.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and I understand that South Dakota is potentially considering replicating this study too. So it's just pretty interesting. I'll say Ben Winchester presented this a few times for us in Montana. And the reason that we did this is maybe this is the same for you, but in some of our communities, we had some, I'll just say established leaders that felt like, well, we can't make any decisions based on Minnesota data. We're special. We're different in Montana. So we said, okay, well, let's do it then. Let's see if we can do it. And we were able to find the funding to make this happen. And so now people can have confidence that this is different, even though it's quite similar to Minnesota. Thanks for coming today. I appreciate your attention.
Are there additional questions?
No questions yes, I did a little bit. Hi, Tara and
Hi.
Travis. I'm Chris Starkville. I think I'm the only one on here from the University of Wisconsin. And I will say up front that as far as doing the study, most of my almost 100% of my time is focused on broadband and getting broadband to rural areas. So I won't be able to replicate the study. But I think based on what I know about the Wisconsin statistics, which I loved, I'm a statistics nerd and I love to stay up on that. And if we did a deep dive, I have reason to believe it'd be similar statistics. Don't forget, I'm in northern Wisconsin. We have the same winter that you do, and just lost it the winter 3 weeks ago, and now it's gone straight to summer. But the question that I have, one of the states that I think a lot of people, and what gets a lot of publicity, is Californians moving to Montana. Okay, whether it should or not, but Georgia was the state that surprised me. It showed up for somewhere around 20% on that slide or something like that.
Those are not percentages. Those are actual just numbers, not percentages. So that is very astute that you saw that. And that actually, Georgia doesn't show up in the top 10 if you look at the sample overall. So we think that there's probably there might be some workforce issues, a reason like maybe a company that moved here from Georgia or has a remote, there's something to do with workforce with the Georgia Yes. We don't see a ton of Georgia folks. It's not, as widely thought of as the other
hypothesize
states.
Like, I don't know, Georgia Pacific or something like that on the forestry connections, or so no idea, but interesting. So
yeah, very interesting. Yeah.
Thank you, but enjoyed it.
Thanks.
Okay. Other questions, thoughts, comments for Tara? Okay. If not, there will be a recording. So next week, you should receive an email from me with the recording PDF of the PowerPoint presentation. And then Tara will get me that fact sheet, and we will attach that as well as also this link you put in the chat box, and that as well for people that weren't live. So
great.
Other than that, the last thing I have is just a reminder that we have another webinar June 28th. So then we'll take a little break in July, but June 28th, the science of a successful presentation will be the next ESP webinar, and you will see communication coming from the national office. If you've not already registered for that, encouraging you to do that. And we thank Tara for your presentation today and appreciate it, and wishing all of you a great rest of the week. What's left of it? We're halfway through. At least if you're on Eastern time, you're more than halfway through, because we're past lunchtime Eastern time zone now.
Thank you,
Tara.